Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
Brought to you by GlanviaConnect.com.
Hello and welcome to Farmview. Well, as usual, it's Kieran O'Connor here with your weekly farming programme. Once again, I have a very busy show for you. This week, on this week's programme, I'll discuss the implications of the new Climate Action Bill for the farming and agri sector. We'll also hear about the attractive traditional farm building grants scheme for 2021, which is now available, and we'll discuss the important issue of succession planning for farming families.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanviaConnect.com, Ireland's biggest online farming shop and more.
Well, earlier this week we had the announcement of the Climate Action Bill. A lot of worry within the agri-food sector, and to discuss this we're joined from the Farmers Journal by Larkin Allen. Larkin, welcome to our programme.
Thanks for having me, Kieran.
Larkin, the Climate Action Bill, obviously within the whole farming sector, there's a lot of concern as regards the implications for the Climate Action Bill would have for the sector. Your overall take on the announcement earlier this week?
Yeah, Kieran, my overall take would be, this Climate Action Bill is a real step up in Ireland's ambition for climate reducing emissions. And agriculture is a big part of our emissions here in Ireland, as we know, because agriculture is such a big part of our economy and we don't really have a heavy industry in Ireland. We've had targets for the sector up to now, and they've been, I suppose, more modest and less, I suppose, hurry for them to be done. But this new bill is going to change that dramatically. You're looking at a pretty sharp increase in what's going to be demanded of the sector, and these targets are also going to be legally binding, meaning that they can be enforced by the courts if the sector isn't doing its part to mitigate emissions. So from a top-line level, the climate bill says that Ireland has to halve its carbon emissions by 2030 over the next decade, which is extremely ambitious. So it's this idea of front-loading all the cuts, that you get as much done in the next decade as possible. And agriculture hasn't been given any special treatment in this bill. It's been included alongside any other sector. Methane from cattle has also been included, just the same as any other greenhouse gas. And there's going to be heavy targets that these emissions of methane and emissions from agriculture are going to have to reduce every year for the next 10 years. And it's going to place a lot of pressure on the agricultural sector, probably something that we haven't been used to up to now.
As regards the agricultural sector, I think it accounts for around 34% of emissions. Obviously, there's big concern within the industry that action has to be taken. But are you concerned that it's been too front-loaded? Because a lot of work is going on the ground. I know it, biodiversity, hedgerows, protected urea, water quality with ASSOP, soil nutrition, slurry spreading. The whole piece, a lot of action has happened, but obviously a lot more needs to happen and happen a lot quicker.
I think you're right, Kieran, in terms of the concern is like the front loading of this probably is harder for agriculture than any other sector because our main, as you rightly said, 34% of all emissions in Ireland comes from the agricultural sector, and within that the majority of the emissions from agriculture are from livestock, and they're methane produced by our cattle and lesser to an extent our sheep. So that methane is a very difficult gas to cut, to reduce. Now, there are some interesting technologies emerging out there in terms of maybe seaweed additives and things like that you can feed to cows that will kind of blocks the cow emitting methane. And there's some very promising trials in different parts of the world on this, but it's still a very early technology. So there probably is, in the long term, a technological solution to methane, but it's not going to be there tomorrow or the next year for farmers to adopt and implement it into their systems to help reduce methane. So that's why I'm worried about this in terms of the front loading. Like the way this bill will work is that they have these things called carbon budgets, and there's going to be 2 5-year carbon budgets for the next decade. The first budget is already going to have to be started. It's for 2021 to 2025, and then there's a 2026 to 2030 carbon budget. And under these carbon budgets, every sector will be given a target of how much it is supposed to be reducing its emissions by. So agriculture potentially could be getting a carbon budget where it has to reduce its emissions by 3 to 5 or to 7% every year in the next 5 years. But we don't have the technology at the minute to reduce methane in a way, a kind of a blocking thing. The only way to reduce methane over in that sort of 5 years would be to cull cattle numbers. And that's a very frightening prospect when you consider that all the talk we've had over the last week about putting a cap on milk production for Glanbia suppliers. I think this bill is going to put a cap on any kind of increase in cattle numbers for every farmer in the country, never mind Glanbia on its own. So it's certainly putting a check to any ambition of growth in the agricultural sector. And my concern will be actually farmers being able to hold on to the numbers that they have over the coming decade, because this front-loading of the Climate Action Bill means that serious pressure is going to come on livestock numbers in Ireland as a way to cut methane emissions.
Now, one area we mentioned is biogenic methane, and to the non-initiated, and even to myself when I was reading about this seems to be mentioned a lot within the whole announcement earlier this week.
You're right, Kieran. And biogenic methane, it's a kind of a nod to an emerging science as well. So, I mean, farmers have long argued that, methane from cattle is different, and that it's part of farming is a unique sector. There is emissions from agriculture, but there's also carbon sequestration on farms into grasslands, hedgerows, trees, and that kind of thing. The biogenic methane, I suppose, it's a nod to science that's come out of the UK over the last number of years by this guy, a climate scientist called Miles Allen, and he's done a lot of work on methane from cattle, where he's sort of saying that if the number of cattle in the country is stable over a 20-year period, then the methane from those cattle actually isn't adding to global warming. Now, Miles Allen is one of the world's leading climate scientists. He would have led the UN's climate science assessment reports back in the early 2000s. Hugely respected guy. He's producing this, and so it has massive credibility with the international climate science community. The problem is this new science hasn't been officially adopted yet by the UN or by the EPA in Ireland or government agencies around the world. Miles Allen has submitted the science to the European Union and the UN for consideration to be included in how they calculate methane emissions. But at the minute, the way we calculate methane emissions is the same as any other gas, and farming is just seen as the same as any other sector. If the Miles Allen research was to come in, it would be a huge help to farmers. There's absolutely no doubt about that. It would make a real difference in how methane is calculated and what farmers are able to do with their livestock. But at the minute, that isn't there. So again, we're at the mercy of waiting until that sort of science is included properly in our inventories for how we calculate carbon emissions. So, if I was the IFA and if I was farmers, I would be pushing our government to try and see, we should be using the Miles Allen research on biogenic methane rather than the system that we've used up to now.
And definitely, it is the government will be making this decision. So farmers and indeed lobby groups obviously will be speaking to their local TDs and getting on to the government and that. And obviously, with the green involvement that then involved in government at the moment, I suppose there's concern in the overall picture emerging from these statements.
Yeah, look, there is a lot of concern in terms of what it might mean for agriculture in the long term. And look, I suppose the Climate Action Bill must be welcomed because we do need to take climate action in this country, and it does, we need to increase our ambition for what we're going to do. But Ireland is unique in terms of our profile of emissions that, agriculture accounts for so much of our emissions compared to any other country. You look at the rest of Europe, agriculture
we're low in industry as well, Larkin, so probably compensates that the percentage is probably tilted because of that.
Exactly. We've no heavy industry, we've no steel industry here, or car industry or anything like that. So agriculture just looks a bigger share it is a bigger share of the pie here because of the absence of any other sort of heavy industry in the country. And that's why there's been such a heavy focus on agriculture in this country when it comes to carbon emissions and climate change, whereas it's not the same in other parts of the world. The focus on agriculture is probably less in other countries when it comes to climate change and reducing emissions. So that's understandable why it's been the focus of the debate so much here in Ireland. And look, agriculture is going to have to play its part. And as you rightly said at the top, Kieran, I think farmers are willing to do their piece. They're changing. We've talked. You mentioned the changes in water quality and protected urea, in low emission slurry spreading. All of these things require investment by farmers, and they've shown their willingness to do it. But change takes time in agriculture. It's a biological process. It's slow. And farmers need to be given the space, to adapt and change the way they do things every day. And that's why my worry is that with these front-loading, legally binding targets, that farmers won't actually be given the time. That sort of the front-loading element of it is going to mean, very serious pressure to do something in the short term hit short-term targets rather than thinking about the long-term potential of the sector to change.
Well, obviously there's going to be a lot of debate over the next number of weeks, and as you say, a worrying scenario for a lot of farms out there, but obviously it's something that we have to tackle. It's up to 2050, but obviously the first 10 years are crucial from this climate action bill. Larkin Allen of the Farmers Journal, as always, Larkin, thanks for taking our call. Indeed, hopefully we'll talk to you in the near future. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about this climate action bill. Thanks for talking to us, Larkin.
Thank you very much.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanbiaConnect.com, Ireland's biggest online farming shop and more.
Well, the topic of early succession planning has been ongoing, particularly on farm, and indeed the importance of early succession planning being vital for farm business, and indeed it's one of the first hurdles that people have to overcome, is that very first step really as regards successional planning. So earlier in the week I got a chance to talk to IFAC partner in the County Waterford office in Dungarvan, and that's Owen Dre. First of all, Owen, welcome back to our programme.
Thanks, Kieran.
Owen, as I said in the intro, early succession planning, it's something really that's put on the long finger, but it's something guys must tackle sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I suppose it's something that's going to happen on every farm, and I suppose it's a matter of when rather than if. It's an area, it's widely known in the industry that it's an area that we all need to improve a little bit on and maybe deal with earlier in the day. And you know, when we're talking about succession, we're covering the area of wills, succession to transferring to successors, and indeed more commonly on farms as we go on is dealing with situations where there is no successor identified.
So when it's really about taking that first step, the husband and wife or the partners or whoever involved on the farm taking the first step and going to chat with their accountant. Yes,
we brought out a booklet, it was in the journal a few weeks ago, and I suppose our main goal with the booklet was to help people in getting the process started. A lot of times when we're talking to clients on succession, they'll say to us, we realise how important it is, but how do we start? Our booklet, you'll see, we have a handy checklist in it. There's a step-by-step approach, and it's all about getting started. Who do we talk to start, and how do we progress the process then once we've started?
Do you find couples or people involved in farm or partners or whatever are coming earlier to you, or is there still a bit of a stigma and again people putting on the long finger, or is there a bit of an improvement when it comes to succession planning?
It's certainly improved, Kieran, over the last few years. I suppose we've seen incentives with the department with revenue through partnerships. There's been a lot of partnerships set up, has been supported by TAMS grants. That's brought the discussion to the forefront and has brought younger farmers involved in the farms. But it's still a major area. We did a report 2 years ago whereby it highlighted there was 56% of farmers were over 60, yet there was only 14% of them had a succession plan in place. It's an area that we are improving, but there's certainly a lot more work to do.
Do people need to have discussion at home first, or you go to your accountant, and who from the family should come for the initial, we'll say, chat as such on it?
Yeah, I'd always say to clients, to try and clarify for yourself what your wishes are. Forget about the more difficult areas of tax and other areas and worrying about other people. The farmer and spouse often have put 30, 40 hard years into work, and you'll often have a relatively clear goal in succession, who you want to give it to you, how you want it to go. So I try and get your own thoughts in place first, and after that then I'd go to the accountant. And the reason I'd send you to the accountant at that point is the next question needs to be asked, I suppose, is around viability of the farm and about drawing requirements. So what the parents need to look at, I suppose, what do they need to get from the farm going onwards? They need to worry about their security, and they need to look at what drawings they need.
One area that has come to the forefront of the last number of years, and there's some high profile farmers in the Waterford catchment area, the whole area of partnerships, while early retirement was also helped there a couple of years back, but the partnership one seems to be one that people are looking at, and the viability of that whole partnership set up on a farm.
Yeah, so the partnerships probably came in around 2015. They've probably been, since in my time working on my present role, is probably the best development around the area of farm succession, because what they've done through grants and through some tax reliefs, they've incentivised the young farmer to enter into a partnership. And I suppose if you compare that, Kieran, to the last incentive that was there like that back in the 90s was the early retirement scheme. While the early retirement scheme was welcome, what it did is it incentivised the older farmer to step away from the farm, wasn't allowed back on the farm, and was paid a pension for that. I suppose the benefit of the partnership, and we see it with, in the booklet we have our local farmers Tom and James Power from Ballymallala there. You'll know them from winning the Milk Quality Award there, and they were always really good in working together, working in a partnership. And the benefit of that is it can give the younger farmer a step into the partnership before succession, and they give the older farmer time to work with the son or daughter before they take over the farm, you know.
So then, as regards the successor and the husband and wife, or the partners, or whoever's involved, how long could this process take, or is it something that you just get the visit in and kind of park it there, or what's involved? Or I know it's very hard to generalise.
The process, Kieran, definitely will take at least 3 months. Can often take up to 6 months and often more. But I suppose it's probably the biggest decision and the biggest move that will be made on the farm in the working lifetime of the farmer. And I suppose as regards, to start it off, I'd suggest that the farmer and his husband or wife would come into the accountant, and we'd start the process from there. And then you'd bring in other advisors from there in relation to solicitors.
Well, I must say the IFAC Succession Guide Farm Succession booklet, it really fills it all out, and there's tables there, and as you say, there's a whole step-by-step process. So as regards guys listening to us, and men, women, children, family, the first steps are, what would be your advice for people who are listening to this interview and say, my God, it's something we've put in the back burner, we better start looking at early succession or succession planning?
So what I start doing is, put together your wishes, have a meeting with your accountant, work out what's viable. So if your wishes are to transfer to the successor, will the farm be in a position to carry the drawings of 2 houses? If the answer is yes, proceed from there. If the answer is not, look at, could you go into other enterprises? Is there ways to make the farm more profitable? Or does off farm work need to be brought into the equation? Does the successor need to work a bit off farm and so on, and from there then we look at obviously the tax side of things. Can we claim some reliefs on the transfer? And then from there we'd start talking to other advisors. So what we do here, and we try and keep the message together. So we correspond to the agricultural advisor, to the solicitor, and we try and make it easy on the farmer that they're not going from one advisor to the other, that we keep the correspondence all in one place.
And I suppose the whole area of wills is tied into this as well, the succession planning, wills, as you say, about solicitors, accountants, the banks and everyone involved. So there's a whole package, but it's really taking the first step, Owen, is what you'd like to remind people this week. Yeah,
it's taking the first step. The wills, Kieran, certainly very important. It's probably relatively scary, the amount of farmers who have no will in place. If you have no will in place, you take the control away from yourself. A lot of people would say to me they don't have a will because they don't know who to leave it to. One line in your will to say, I leave all my assets to my spouse, is probably all you need to avoid a significant problem. And you can go from there, go through the succession process and then change your will further down the line,
So really take that first step, talk to your accountant. As we said, this new booklet, the IFAC Succession Guide Farm Succession booklet, was really a step-by-step. And I suppose, like everyone else I've spoke to before we came on air, you're working a lot online, working from home, you're not meeting people face-to-face. But how does it work from an accountant point of view? Where can people find out more? Obviously, they can get the booklets when the office reopens, but as regards people finding out more, or will you post them out?
Yeah, so anyone can ring our office 058 41074 and we post you out a booklet. It can be got online on our IFAC website. Send out copies there as well.
Well, Owen, listen, well done to you now involved in IFAC Succession Guide, Farm Succession Planning, a booklet step by step of this very important area of succession planning. That's Owen Dre, IFAC partner, and of course well known from the Dungarvan office of IFAC in County Water. Thanks for taking our call, and I'm sure you'll have a big uptake on this, and hopefully.
Thanks, Kieran.
Well, some great news recently when the Minister for Agriculture, Food and Marine, Charlie McConnell announced the opening of the 2021 Glass Traditional Farm Building Grant Scheme, with a fantastic grants of up to €1.5 million available, with closing date just around the corner. Earlier in the week I got a chance to talk to Anna Meehan. She's Project Manager of Glass Traditional Farm Buildings Grant Scheme in the Heritage Council. Anna, welcome to our programme.
Many thanks for having me on, Kieran.
Anna, that's a fantastic announcement. A great opportunity here for people to upgrade their farm buildings. 1.25 million available in grants in the Glass Traditional Farm Building Grant Scheme, in the Glass scheme.
It's wonderful news, isn't it, Kieran? It's a fantastic investment in our heritage, in our rural built heritage, also in the skills people that are needed to carry out the repairs on these buildings. So we're just delighted to be doing this scheme in partnership with the Department of Agriculture. And we hope that as many glass farmers that are out there that do have traditional farm buildings will consider applying to the scheme.
Now, of course, in a lot of farmyards, in the old traditional farmer yards, there's real fantastic traditional buildings there with beautiful cuts going and great local craftsmanship involved and local materials in their structures. And really, there's a huge potential out there.
Massive potential, Kieran. And if you think of it, a lot of these buildings, they're on the early ordnance survey map. I was talking to somebody actually in Waterford last week. They had the map they have their building, it's shown on the 1838 Ordnance Survey map, which means it's over 180 years old. And it's enduring, it's surviving, it's being retained. It's incredible in terms of, it's a testament to the skills of the people who built it. So if people are prepared to do it, it's something that I think almost could last indefinitely.
Now, for people who want to get involved in this scheme, as I mentioned earlier, the closing date literally is just around the corner for people. It's Monday the 5th of April. But as regards people getting involved, who's entitled to get involved and what type of grants, the range of grants available and what's the maximum grant available in this scheme?
Firstly, the requirement is that you must be a GLOS farmer. So that means you must have a GLOS contract with the Department of Agriculture. It must be a farm outbuilding you're applying for, so not the house that you're living in. And the grants available, they're anything from 4,000 to 25,000 euros. So that's quite a significant range. And the grant won't be for more than 75% of the total project cost. So it's a very good grant in terms of the investment of what you can do for repairing your buildings.
Fantastic. As regards people getting involved and applying for that and for more information, because some guys listening to us might say, my God, we have some buildings that we could really apply within this scheme. How difficult is it, or how many hoops have you to jump through to get your hands on that attractive grant?
I hope it's not too difficult for people. I mean, this year the scheme has moved online, but we have very good advice in terms of how to make your application. So you'll be able to make your application online. That's at www.heritagecouncil.ie. At this stage, all we ask for is for you to answer the questions on the form, to provide a map, to provide particular photographs and a quote. And that's it. That's all that's required at this stage by the deadline of the 5th of April.
So really it's www.heritagecouncil.ie. As regards the uptake in these schemes in the past, have you been happy, and particularly down here in Waterford in the South East, what type of uptake have you had, Anna?
In terms of the funding that's available, we can support about 70 to 80 projects. We've always had good interest in the South East, in Waterford, Wexford. Definitely there's lost farmers there. There's also very interesting outbuildings there. So we hope to support as many projects as we can that do apply.
Well, Anna, listen, it's fantastic news and a great announcement that 1.25 million available in the upgrading and the opening up of the last traditional farm buildings grant scheme. But the big news is, and the important news, the closing date is just around the corner. The closing date, of course, coming up on Monday week. That's the 5th of April. Anna Meehan of the Heritage Anna, listen, thanks a million for taking our call. The Heritage Council, you're doing great work, and hopefully we'll have a good uptake down here in Waterford and the South East. And thanks for taking our call. Well, before I go on the racing front, with a great run of successes for Waterford Connection continues this week, and following up on the brilliant week in Cheltenham last week with Knockeen Butlerstown trainer Henry de Bromma training no less than 6 winners, including the historic Big Three Festival features, and of course the brilliant win for Dungarvan owner breeders, the Flynn family of the Park Hotel, in the festival inaugural Mayor's Chase. Was well done all round. Well, the success continued this week with local Waterford connections. Henry was back in the winners' enclosure at Thurles. At Wexford, young Kieran, Aglish trainer Shane O'Brien saddled a brilliant winner for Dungarvan owners Louise and Raymond Beresford, while up north Dunmore East owner Jim Power had an impressive winner in Downpatrick, and at Tipperary he'd win for Portlaw owners the Dunphy brothers, as well as Ballyduff Upper jock the Evergreen Tom Feeney. Cross Channel, Ballynaneen native Pat Phelan saddled a winner at Linkfield, while his nephews brothers Sean and Niall Houlihan, who are building up such a huge reputation Cross Channel, well, they rode winners at Fakenham, Chepstow and Taunton. Well, that's my lot for this week's programme, so from myself, Kieran O'Connor's goodbye for now. Once again, my thanks to Ollie and Sean for all their help in putting this week's programme together. So stay safe, keep up the protocol, and hopefully I'll have your company again same time next week.
Farmview with Kieran O'Connor on WLR.
With GlanviaConnect.com. Thousands of products in the palm of your hand.